RMJ Movie Reviews back again with another happy 4th of July surprise movie review. And what movie says Independence Day? What movie says 4th of July? What movie rings happiness? But 10 to Midnight, starring Charles Bronson, which would actually be that movie right there. And that's not the original artwork. This is actually a double feature of two Charles Bronson movies, which would be 10 to Midnight and Kinjay, Forbidden Subjects. I actually prefer 10 to Midnight over Kinjay, Forbidden Subjects, but I might get into that a little bit later. But right now, I'm reviewing 10 to Midnight. One of my subscribers had requested this movie a long time ago, and I'm just now fulfilling it. And I just thought about it right off the rip. During the 80s, Charles Bronson, I for one am a fan of Charles Bronson. I'm 34 years old, so my movie history of Charles Bronson is the 80s and up to, towards the end of his career, which has been the early 90s. He was still doing stuff throughout the 90s, but it was pretty much over. Kind of that decade of the 80s is my history with Charles Bronson, but I know his film career goes way back to, the Dirty Dozen and Once Upon a Time, I think, in the West, and many he done Sergio Leone pictures. He's done a lot of stuff. Bronson's been in the game for a very long time. The Mechanic, just tons of movies that he's done. He's a fantastic actor. But my film knowledge of Charles Bronson was basically the Cannon movies throughout the 80s. And those who know Charles Bronson know his long filmography, realize that, for famous actors like Charles Bronson, their career kind of came to an end around the 80s. And you had low-budget extraordinaires, the Globus, Cannon Films, Ganakam Globus, that Electric Boogaloo documentary is about them. And they specialized in low-budget action pictures. And they had three guys at that time. They had Charles Bronson, Chuck Norris, and they had Michael Dudikoff, the American Ninja. They paid all three of these actors a large sum of money, at least as much as a low-budget film company could provide. They provide these guys, they give them a contract, they pay them large sums, and they do a certain amount of low-budget action movies for them. That's what all three of those guys did for that film company. Charles Bronson's career was pretty much at an end, so Charles Bronson pretty much just said, what the hell, might as well take my $1 million paychecks and sign on for the string of really guilty pleasure horrible films that he did, which would namely be the Death Wish sequels, Assassination, Kinjay, Forbidden Subjects, this film, 10 to Midnight. What's another one? There's a couple of other ones in there that he did that I can't even think right off the top of my head, but those are the ones I can think of right off the rip. On to 10 to Midnight. 10 to Midnight came when they were kind of doing this whole hybrid thing of like slasher 80s pictures, because this was the time of Friday the 13th, Prom Night, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all those. I think this was even before Nightmare on Elm Street, but those type of movies were in vogue. The naked girls and the sex and the death and all that kind of thing. And then they kind of eased in a Charles Bronson movie. So what you got here is slasher film, and you got Charles Bronson with a gun, which is what you see on the cover of this box here. And I think the original artwork, which if anybody can find the original artwork for 10 to Midnight, it should be on the internet somewhere. It is the most brilliant piece of artwork. I really do miss that about, really, that's one of the things, digressing, that's what I really miss about the video store era and going to the movies, is when they really used to have artists like paint the pictures of all the video covers. If anybody can find it who subscribed to my channel, really cool piece of artwork. What I'm going to do is start putting my business email address on the bottom of my movie reviews, so if any one of my subscribers want to contact me or trade movies or movie posters or whatever, we'll have a link and we'll be able to trade off things and all that kind of thing. But I'm going to put that up a little bit later. On to the film. So basically, 10 to Midnight, Charles Bronson is a cop. What a surprise. I'm assuming he's a homicide detective. And there is a deranged, perverted, misogynistic serial killer on the loose who delights in butchering young girls with a switchblade because they turned down his very creepy advances. And pretty soon throughout the movie, the twisted, perverted serial killer gets his eye on Charles Bronson's daughter, who's a nurse. And the clock starts 10 to midnight before Charles Bronson can rescue her. That tells the story of the movie. And I like 10 to midnight. Now, let me be clear here. I can distinguish the difference between good films. You know, The Godfather. You know, The Departed. Goodfellas. The Never-Ending Story. Good films. You know what I mean? I can make that distinguish. And I can distinguish between, Grindhouse. From Dusk Till Dawn. Death Wish 2, Death Wish 3, Death Wish 4. Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. 10 to Midnight, American Ninja. I can make those distinguish between things that are trashy and I just have a good time because I know how trashy they are, and good films. I know the difference between the two. Now, when I say I like 10 to Midnight, that does not in any shape or form mean that I am saying it's a good film, because we all know that it's not a good film because it comes from Canon Films. So let me make that clear that I understand that distinguish between the difference. Is this an awful film? You bet it is. Here's my whole thing. I have absolutely no problem with showing films that depict sexual violence, rape, graphic violence, murder, all those kind of things. I think in filmmaking and art, if you want to call it art, I think you can depict those subject matters because, it's art. You're free to do with and display what you want. I think there does become a line between when you're kind of pushing the boundaries and almost kind of unknowingly sending bad messages to the viewer, which I kind of think 10 to Midnight does a little bit. There's one review I came across that tends to think that the film kind of sympathizes with the killer. I'd agree with that. I would say the film kind of tries to balance both issues. It kind of tries to get you to see Bronson's point of view and the pervert killer's point of view. But I will say that I think the film kind of leaned more towards the killer. The guy's really creepy. He likes to stalk girls around. He doesn't in any way hit on the girls. And he's established very early on that there's no mistake about it. He is a twisted, sick killer. And that's really all he is. It's not even like he's not even really a stereotypical psychopath where he could at least hide it. Nah, he's just like flat out just like, hey look, I want to eat your pussy. And it's just like, wow, it's like, really, dude? Like, seriously? He says this to like a chick like at the office. He tries to undress this girl in the office. So he's not a well-balanced person. And there's a lot of girls being humped with their tits out, and then they get stabbed to death with this gigantic knife. And I guess it's, the guy runs around butt naked, and the girls tend to really run butt naked with their boobies swinging back and forth, and they're screaming, and really the camera really lingers on them as they really kind of we're talking like a minute and a half, almost 2 minute takes of the chicks just going and then he'll like slit their throat, and then they die like it's really that long, and the camera lingers there as they cry and they scream and they plead and say, I'll do anything you want, as he butchers them, and then they kind of go and they die. So the film really looks on in a very uncomfortable, voyeuristic, perverted kind of way, and the chicks are always getting slaughtered while their tits are like booming around. The first death scene where he kills the couple in a very large 1980s van, which my father had one of those vans, and any one of us who lived through that time period probably remembers riding around in those big, giant, creepy-looking Manhunter vans. that kill is uncomfortable, and I think the one that comes towards the end of the film, where he murders John Travolta's wife, Kelly Preston, a very cute and young Kelly Preston, and I think it's the girl from Thriller, I think, who he kills in the shower. She's got her tits hanging out, stabs her to death. She goes up against the shower and goes, "Ugh," tits hanging out, blood all over her stomach. And then the one that really made me feel uncomfortable was when he killed the girl with the short black hairdo, because basically he terrorizes her for like a good 3-4 minutes before he kills her. "You're lying," and he's shaking her on the bed, and she, I mean, she's out of her mind. He's out of his mind. It really is uncomfortable. And then after he kills the black chick in the shower, he goes back. She's crawling in the corner saying no, and then he just promptly kills her. So the scenes where he murders the women it's very uncomfortable how it just lingers and lingers and lingers and lingers as they, that was the one that was really uncomfortable. Was the killing the chick with the short black hair. That scene was just really uncomfortable. I think if you tone that stuff down, and you kind of tone down, I mean, they still could have had the nudity and the sex in it, but I think if you would have just pulled it back a little bit, pulled back some of the nudity, pulled back the lingering of the kills, I don't have no problem with them exploiting that subject matter, but I think if it just wouldn't have lingered on it so long, I think it wouldn't have made it as unpleasant seeing the subject matter. That's my problem with the film is those kill scenes. Now the stuff with Bronson is great, and Andrew Stevens, who was the psychopath in The Seduction with Morgan Fairchild, he plays a really good role here as Bronson's partner, and Bronson plants evidence on the guy to really take down the serial killer Jeffrey Lewis, and Will Brumley from The Thing pops up in this thing too. But really, there's a lot of really strong actors in this thing. And Andrew Stevens, who my mother just can't stand him because she saw him in The Seduction. But he really plays a very sympathetic character here. I think Andrew Stevens' acting is really good in this film. And Bronson is really good. There's a scene I really love where Bronson and Andrew Stevens are going at it outside the courtroom. And I really like that scene. It's a very good scene for this type of movie. I like that scene. And of course, a classic scene everybody who's seen this movie remembers probably is where he pulls out the jerk-off machine and he goes, "What's this for?" "It's for jacking off." It's the most ridiculous thing. And Bronson says it with total conviction and seriousness. Charles Bronson is great in this movie. I love when the kid, the psycho guy, loses it and he goes, he's lying. He throws the chair to the door. I love how Bronson just goes that's the quickest you see Bronson move the whole. Bronson just kind of plodding along. This is the quickest you see him move when the dude throws the chair at the door. And the guy goes nuts, for real. You can see the whole set wall shaking. It's hysterical. But 10 to Midnight is a very good piece of sleaze. Axel Foley's best friend from Beverly Hills Cop 1 pops up, and I can't remember the actress' name. She was in Deep Star 6 too. Very, very pretty, very pretty. She's good in the movie. She's really, really, really good. And it's a fun piece of sleaze. I just really think, digressing a little bit, supposedly the filmmakers based this guy. I can't remember who the real killer was that they used for Silence of the Lambs, who would beat the girls over the head with the cast. But I think, I can't remember what killer guy that was in real life, but I think some of his murders were a little bit weaved into the story here, because I think that was all around that time in the late 70s, early 80s, which makes it doubly uncomfortable. And I think he did kill some nurses who were college students too, I think. But it does kind of make it uncomfortable. I think if they would have just pulled some of the sex and death back a little bit, it kind of would have made it more just a straightforward serial killer crime movie. But the fact that it lingers on it so long is really what makes it, uncomfortable. But Bronson is just great. I love the cheesy early 80s music, with them dancing at the parties, and they're all just kind of going and they're all dancing like this, and the white chicks got headbands on. It's typical 80s cheese. That stuff is all good. It's a nicely sadistic, sleazy piece of B-movie late night trash, and it fulfills its obligation as that. So, for seeing a good, strong, stern Charles Bronson, I will add that I will say all the girls in this movie are hot, and I will say doubly, the chicks that the psycho killer hits on at the movie theater in the beginning are like seriously hot. And I'm saying there's this one chick like in a striped shirt who he's sitting next to in the movie. She's like hot. Like if I saw her in real life, nah, it'd be on. I just had to digress and share that with the audience. But you know, yeah. So, you know, as a sleazy movie fan, you always got to have points for the hot chicks with the big rack. But yeah, you know, Bronson is a good stern presence. You got the good cheesy 80s, and of course the theme song where like at the end of the movie, it just makes it doubly hilarious that like when he kills, he's like butt ass naked and he makes sure he's pretty. He puts his hairspray on and he comes out with his huge knife and surgical gloves. Not to mention he's walking around the place in his bare feet. And now what we know about CSI and evidence, I mean, my goodness, his skin fibers will be all over the place. His footprints. I mean. Duh, you know, but it's just funny and like it's just hilarious ridiculousness. Bronson sells his part. He's good. Andrew Stevens is really good. Will Brimley is really good. Jeffrey Lewis is good in the movie. There's one actor, I don't remember the guy's name, but I think he is the serial killer guy's other lawyer with a mustache. You guys have seen this actor in other pictures. He's really good too. I read one review that said the acting is atrocious. I don't think the acting is atrocious. Maybe the acting from the serial killer guy is kind of not so good in some parts. Good actor, but you know the way it's played in here. But I will say the scenes where he's terrorizing the girls, he goes, "You're lying, you're lying." He did a good job of playing hysterical when he smashes the door. You know, he's lying. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy. But good piece of sleaze, and I highly recommend it to people who can sit through this sort of thing. So, thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and leave comments down below about 10 to midnight about some of the subject matter I brought up about the film and about Bronson. Digressing a little bit before I end the review, Bronson did not like any of these movies he made for canon around that time. Bronson was making his money, and you know what? Seeing as how we got all these remakes and PG-13 diehards and all this sort of thing, as much as people can't say they can't stand Bruce Willis now, who were fans of him for many years, I can kind of see how, you know, you just get to a point where it's like, hey, I just take the check. You know, so I can't say that I disagree with Bronson. You know, hey, give me my 10-movie contract and I'll roll out these crappy bit of movies and I won't even watch them. Just give me my $12 million paycheck and I'll go and get my house. So that's all I got to say about that. Highly recommended piece of sleaze. Leave comments down below about 10 to midnight. Anything I mentioned. I will be back with my movie review of the classic Revenge of the Nerds from 1984, starring Anthony Goose Edwards and Robert Louis Carradine. RMJ Movie Reviews. I'll see you soon.